Call the meeting to order. Everyone's in attendance tonight except Commissioner Norwood, who will not be with us this evening. Item number 2, at the Commissioner's request, discuss any item of concern on the regular session agenda of May 21st, 2019. Around the room. Okay. All right. Seeing none. We're going to go to item 3, which is introduction and interview of the Ward 6 Commission applicants. We had 5 applicants to start with. One of those withdrew, so we have 4 applicants. And we're going to allow them to speak and say whatever it is they'd like, but give them a little time to talk to us about why they think they would be the right person for the job. So I'll just take them in the order that they're listed here, which is probably alphabetically. Jack Bean. Please go up to the podium.
Is this on?
Yep.
Okay. So the first thing I'd like you to know is I probably win this right away because George and I are about the same size. You can still see me, I hope. I'm going to say first off why I came back to Vance Air Force Base in 1995 after being here in 1966 when this was a town of about 35,000. I went through pilot training here. In 1995, I was chosen to be the boss or the commander of the Sims and Academics at Vance Air Force Base. I was at from 1995 to 2010 when I retired. My wife is still here, and she's still practicing law for the about the 25th year, so I can play golf a little bit. That's the plan. And the second thing is the reason we also brought my father here for about 28 years, and he stayed with us for about 28 years and passed away. So the reason I came here was for the job, and I knew Vance before, and I knew Enid before, and it was a great town to be from and in. So that's the reason we came back. Second thing is why I want to talk just a little bit about Call Lake. I don't want to get into a whole bunch of conversation about it because I don't know that much about it. What I'd like to tell you is that I can learn fast. I'm a quick learner. I know about Call Lake, and I would like to learn more before I made a decision whether to accept it or not accept it. I mean, you're all not sure yet what we're going to do with it. The plan is to have it. I hope that's the plan, and I hope it stays that way. And I would like to say another thing. I've talked to some people about this just in passing, that I have an idea that possibly we could, it doesn't have to be, but there might be a way to have the trucks on 412 pass by us on another route due to the fact that I've sat on 412 and, Van Buren, I've sat on Oakwood, and the light turns green and I'm ready to go, and I look both ways because I'm afraid a truck is going to go through the red light at about 50 miles an hour, and my car won't take that, nor will my body. So that's a possibility. It's to look at. I do not know all the facts. That be a plan that I would like to look at. You notice I'm going fairly firm, fast, because there's no sense wasting everybody's time on everything. Finally, I'd like to say that it's been a wonderful time here at Enid so far. I like being here. It's a wonderful place. I think that the reason I could be of help to the board is for 15 years, I had 85 people that worked with me and for me, and it was great to have them be around me. And I'm going to tell you that people have great ideas, and you should listen to their ideas and take them into consideration, and hopefully you can make a decision from all those people. And that's what I think is important in making a decision, is to take all the things into account and then finally make a decision on it. Not always your decision. It may not be your decision. It may be somebody else's decision, but you have to have that information so you can make that decision. Do you have any other questions, comments?
Commissioners have anything?
Good?
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Bean. Next up, Mr. Mason, David Mason.
Thank you, Commissioners, for allowing me this opportunity to apply and to speak to you. I want to start off by just briefly talking a little bit about my past so you know kind of who I am, where I came from. I was raised in southwest Oklahoma, in a little town called Altus, which is a wonderful town. I was raised by two great parents, of which we moved up here several years ago due to health issues. They still live here today. I graduated Altus High School, went on to WOSC, obtained an Associate of Arts degree, then went to Edmond, back when it was still called Central State. It's University of Central Oklahoma now, where I obtained a teaching certificate. Taught for 12 years. During that time, I also drove back and forth to Weatherford and obtained my master's degree in secondary administration in the event that I ever wanted to be a principal or a superintendent. I found out real quick when you're in the teaching industry, you have to supplement your income, so I started building houses down at Altus. Wasn't long till my banker told me you need to pick one or the other, either teach or build houses. So I chose to build houses and a lot of commercial stuff. And then later on, I was able to actually just by circumstance was offered an opportunity to get into the insurance business with one of the large carriers. The agency I had in Altus was one of the fastest growing agencies in the state of Oklahoma. I did that for a little over 3 years and obtained a promotion with the same carrier. They moved me to Enid to be a district manager, where I oversaw about 26 agencies in northwest Oklahoma and about $350 million worth of premium. I was able to actually move to Pittsburgh and help that carrier open a brand new state, which was new to me. I'd never done that before. It was very, very interesting. And then we had the opportunity, my wife and I, to move back to Enid and work for another insurance carrier or agency here until I retired about 2 years ago. I did meet my wife in Enid in 2008. Between us, we're a blended family. We have 5 boys. Ages range from 28 to 17. So we're pretty close to being empty nesters. Whenever I ask myself what qualifies me to have this position, to serve on this commission, I look at several things. I think as we go through life, everything that you do or you encounter, I think, can probably better prepare you for what lies ahead. I think whenever I was a school teacher, I think it allowed me to work on being a better communicator. You can have great ideas, but if you cannot convey that to others, it's usually just a moot point. In the construction business, I was able to develop my abilities to schedule and to budget and to manage a variety of people. When you're in the construction business, you have to deal with the end user, the person purchasing the property, as well as all those contractors. And that's quite a range of people in all different educational levels. When I was in the insurance business, I think it helped me develop the ability to develop long-term goals. The insurance business does not turn on a dime. It takes a lot of time to make changes, and you have to plan for the future. It also helped me develop my conflict resolution skills. When you're a district manager, no one ever calls your office just to pat you on the back. They're usually upset about something. But I think the main thing that the insurance business helped me to develop was to have a compassion for others. Until you've gone out and seen someone that's lost their home or their automobile or a family member, and you deliver a check, I don't think you fully understand what the work is that you do until you see that result, then when you can help those people get back on their feet. I will tell you that I think I work extremely hard at everything I've ever done. I try to hear both sides of every situation. There's always more than one side. I try to thoroughly think through issues. I like to, excuse me, I like to ask other people for their opinion. I don't claim to have all the answers, but I do think it's important to ask a variety of different people what they think about different topics. And I do think I'm good at making hard decisions. Sometimes you have to make hard decisions today for the betterment of the group over the next 1 year, 5 years, or 20 years. As far as goals, things that I would see that are important to me, I would say I would probably divide it into 2 areas. First of all, I guess probably the politically right thing would say to have goals for great roads and bridges, and those are all important. However, I don't see that as a goal. I see that as a ongoing expense and responsibility of a city. That's not necessarily a goal. But probably my first goal is I want to be a part of the Call Lake project for several reasons. I think it's going to be a great project. However, when you jump out there and spend $350 million on a project that's going to take 3 to 4 years, having been in the construction business, I know that those overruns can happen very, very quickly. And you take a 10% overrun on that amount of money, that can get out of hand real, real quick. So I think it's going to be very important that as a commission that we look at that and question everything that happens and just try to be studious with those dollars. And then, so that's would be one of my goals. The other, and this is more of an idea probably than a goal, is as I look around at our community, I think we're doing a lot of great things. I see First Friday, I see a great Y that we have down there. I see a soccer complex that's coming. I see the food truck red brick event that we have downtown. I'm starting to see a lot of concerts in our event center. But I know as a businessman, and I think most people will agree with me, that as you try to hire people and we bring potential candidates into Enid, whether that's in the school system, our superintendent's trying to hire teachers, or if that's one of our businesses, their HR department inviting someone to come to Enid and interview for a job, I tell you what's going to happen is every time they're going to bring their significant other with them and they're going to drive around, they're going to look at Enid and they're going to try to see if they can see themselves raising a family here. And I think we need to come up with those ideas to do that. People always go, you know, well, how are you going to pay for that? I think we can do that through partnerships. I think anything that betters both our workforce, our schools, I think it will just benefit us. And I think there's a great opportunity to form these. I was in Fort Collins last week, and I saw lots of culture. I saw lots of art projects all over the community, interactive art projects. And we were walking around late one night when we got there, and I asked my wife, I said, you think anybody uses these interactive ones? Yes, they do. The next day we were there, everyone was using them. So those are inexpensive things that we can do to create a community that people want to come and live here. And I think that's what we can do as a city and as a council and as a community to make that happen. So those are my 2 main goals, probably. Any questions or comments or? No?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Roy Schneider.
Thank you for having me today, and I'm delighted to be part of such a august 4 groups, 4 people stepping up here for this wonderful position. Many of you know me. You have seen my resume. I'll just hit a couple of highlights. I've been in Ward 6 for 13 years now. Love Enid. We've decided to retire here. Let let me hit on about three things. First of all, if you're looking for somebody on the commission right now who has hands-on local government experience, I might be your guy. It started with me being the press secretary for the mayor of San Diego, a mayor who was pretty successful. He went on to become a two-term U.S. senator from California and then came back and became a two-term governor of California. And San Diego at that time was the 5th largest city in the nation. This is the 80s. Some places in Arizona and Texas have overtaken it since then, but it was the 5th largest city in the nation and a very successful and ambitious politician. And I was his voice in San Diego. And for me to be able to do that, I had to know what was going on in city government at every level, in every place, from the police department to the potholes. And when I spoke, I had to speak with the authority of Pete. So I had to know all the ins and outs of a rather big government. Fast forward now, more recently, I served as the head of the county election board. Now that's basically department head for the county. So I not only had the big picture for a city like San Diego, I also knows what it's like to sit there and run a department within local government. I had about 18 elections while I was at the election board. It was a very interesting time for those few years because for the first time in decades they were upgrading all of the equipment. Everybody had to be retrained. It was a very busy time. And I had everything from the smallest school board election to the Super Bowl, which is of course a presidential election. And I was there for the presidential election of 2012. So if you're looking for somebody who has some hands-on, nitty-gritty experience with what it's like in local government, whether it's the big picture or the smaller picture of actually running a government department, I might be your guy. If you're looking for somebody with some media experience, I know Steve does a great job. We have a great experience here. We've got a great PR department, a lot of stuff being posted on the web, all of that. That's wonderful. But if you're interested in perhaps having somebody on the commission who actually has a media background and some media experience, I have that. For 15 years, I was a journalist. I spent that time as an investigative reporter, including running a few politicians out of office. I also was a columnist and an editorial writer and an opinion writer of the San Diego Tribune. I then left the Tribune and became an editorial writer and opinion writer for the Los Angeles Times. So I know what it's like to be not only the person who speaks for the city, but also the reporter who's asking the questions of the person who speaks for the city. And of course, no surprise, being a top-level person in the mayor's office in San Diego, my expertise as an opinion writer was local government, local county, and even state government at that point. So I had to stay on top of all those things. When the editorial board looked around and said, what are you going to write on? Who's the expert on this? They looked at me for all the local, state, and county issues. Also, if you're looking for somebody who loves the military and understands the military, and I know there's a lot of those here right now, I might be your guy too. I'm a veteran myself. I served 1968 to 71, combat engineer. I was overseas the whole time. I joined when I was 17 years old, got out when I was 19. I was a teenager the whole way through my military career. And at that time, you could not go into combat at 17, you had to be 18. Well, 68 might ring a bell to you. Everybody was going to Vietnam at that time. The only reason I ended up not going to Vietnam is somebody finally in my final training said, wait a minute, Schneider's 17, where the heck are we going to send Schneider? So they sent me to the other dangerous place, Korea. So I spent 13 months, 13-month tour in Korea, pouring bunkers about 30 miles south of the DMZ as a second line of defense. We were out in the tents most of the time, kind of if you ever watched the old TV show MASH, we were out in the tents, and even the monsoon season, we were out in the tents pouring those bunkers. I then spent the rest of my military career in 2 assignments in Germany. Now, more recently, I was delighted and honored to be able to be an honorary commander of one of the squadrons at Vance Air Force Base. They have that, some of you probably know it and have served in it. They ask community leaders to come on board and for a full year to walk along the side with one of the squadrons. I was blessed to have the 8th Training Squadron, the 8-ballers, and you get to be really granular. You go in there, they give you the tour, you even see the security dogs, you do the simulators, which I crashed every time because I tried to drive it like a car instead of look at the instruments. And you even get to fly on the planes. So I actually got to get up in a T6, and get in the whole gravity suit and the whole thing. And I mean, I didn't just fly in it. He insisted that I fly it. So there I was in a T6, flying along. Fortunately, there was a real pilot there as well. So if you're looking for somebody who has real government experience, now I know there's a lot to learn about Enid, but real government experience, some media experience. Actually, when I retired from the editorial board, News and Eagle asked me to come on and be on the editorial board. I did that for a few years, so I know what it's like for the small papers as well. Or if you're looking for somebody who loves the military and understands military life, I may be your guy too. Now, just very quickly on issues, I'm a huge, huge supporter of Caw Lake. David makes a very good point when he says we've got to watch every dime and how quickly cost overruns on a project this big can go. But I can tell you right now, I am hugely proud of the people of Enid to vote to tax themselves and invest in themselves to be sure that we have water for decades. I love that about this town, that it would do that. And I would love to be a part of making sure that that comes to fruition and comes in a way that the public expects it to come. I'm also a big supporter, of course, of bringing business to town, business development for restaurants and retail and, of course, the theater, all those kinds of things. But I'm also a huge supporter of quality of life issues. I love the Enid Trail system. I'm out there all the time. I've seen some of you all out there. I think it's fantastic as we invest in quality of life. And too often you hear people do this false dichotomy. They say, well, it's either the event center or it's potholes, or it's quality of life or it's potholes. And it's not. It's both. The way we get the money to fill those potholes is we bring the businesses, we bring people to town, we have a quality of life so that when their lives visit, they go, yes, I like this town. Look at this. Look at what's going on here. We can go to events here. We can walk here. We can ride here. We can bring the kids here. That's what's going to bring the people here. And then the people will stay here and the potholes will fill themselves. Any questions? Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Mr. Stewart.
Mayor and Board of Commissioners, thanks for taking the time to visit with us this evening so that you can wisely choose someone to fill the vacant seat. I, as probably most of you know, was in this position just a few years ago, and so I think what I bring to the table is a very short learning curve. Having been in the seat from 2011 to 2014, getting to be a part of the decisions for the Event Center and the Caw Lake project. While I was initially not in favor of that Caw Lake project, when looking at all the information, all the studies, all the expert opinions, my desire to have a lake went away because I did not want to gamble our taxpayer money on something that may or may not be filled. So I have had that experience, and I think it's important. But I'm seeking your appointment to fill the vacancy and I've resided in Enid since '97 and in Ward 6 since 2014 when I moved there out of Ward 2, which is why my position in that ward got vacated after getting married. So I have spent my 22 years in Enid working, my wife would say tirelessly, but I take a lot of joy in it for Enid, whether in civic groups, through the city directly, or through private business. I've owned 2 businesses here and know that is important. You've got to support local businesses and encourage that development. I think it's big. I am familiar with the unique relationship that Enid has with Vance Air Force Base. It is like no other. I've had a chance to talk to a great many military members who are here, and they really do rave about that relationship that we've built. I also got to help with the Woodring expansion of the hangar and their runway that helps Vance with their mission, and I spoke to Colonel Simmons recently, and he really said that that's crucial to to what they're doing and their ability to operate by being able to get the T-38s out there. So I've raised 4 children. Well, still raising a couple of them, but I've got one in college, one that graduates Thursday night, and actually won't be at the meeting tonight because I've got that one he's going to be at the receiving awards tonight as he's getting ready to join the military. And so I asked for your vote, but I'll have to hear about it a little bit later. So I appreciate your patience there. But I think my recent time on the commission gives me a much reduced learning curve where I can pick right back up and know the constituents and what they're wanting. And it's been said, but you've got a great slate of candidates for this position. I was very glad to see that, and while there's no wrong decision, the hard decision is you can only choose one. So I think that's going to be your task tonight. And then really, I'm passionate about Enid, our high quality of life, diversifying our economic security, building our workforce opportunities, and protecting our strong family values, protecting what we have, and growing for the future. So with that, if there's any questions, I'd be happy to address those. Okay, thank you guys.
Thank you. I think I speak for all of us. I'm just elated that we had such a slate of officers, such a number of people that would come forward and want to volunteer for this position. All qualified candidates. You're making the decision tough on all of us, and I appreciate the fact that you all stepped up and came forward to do that. So we'll have to ponder that a little more upstairs as we get going, and we'll be thinking from now until then. So thanks for making us think and work, and thanks for stepping up. Okay. Next, item number 4, discuss the proposed 2019-2020 City of Enid budget. What everybody's really been waiting for.
Good evening, Mayor and Commissioners. Tonight we pick up with the final 7 funds that we have not yet covered. Again, this was the budget as originally presented to you. We have made one slight modification that we picked up from the meeting this last week. 2 weeks ago, actually, Commissioner Zell wished to extend the mill and overlay project on Randolph from 4th Street to 7th Street. In reviewing that process, we've identified some funds this year that we can go ahead and do the landfill expansion that was originally budgeted in Fund 40. And so we are proposing to remove that from next year's budget, fund it from this year's current budget, and then reallocate those dollars. So EMA, it's an increase and a decrease out in transfers just between 2 funds, and then reducing revenue and expense and capital improvement to remove that landfill project, and then to reallocate that $150,000 and increased transfer to street improvement, and then that expenditure that goes along with it. So slight modification. The only numbers that change as we relook at page 10 is a decrease of 150 here, and then it increases here and here in the street improvement fund. Our overall numbers at the bottom are exactly the same.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Our first fund that we're going to cover tonight is the airport fund, and we have Keston Cook here, who's the airport operations manager, and he's going to go over that budget for you.
Good evening, Commissioners, Mr. Mayor, City Manager. Thank you for your time today. I'll try to keep this as short and sweet as possible. So, as I'm sure you all are aware, we are an enterprise fund out at the airport, and as such, we have to balance our expenses with our revenues, of which we have 3 major sources. First and foremost would be our jet and avgas sales. Second would be hangar and land leases. And third, we get some minor and miscellaneous income from pilot supplies and oil sales. Looking at this graph up here, on the left, you'll see our revenue. And on the current year and prior year, you'll see it's much greater than the projected. This is due largely to some grant reimbursements that we are receiving for projects that are currently being completed, they total about 1.1 million. So the expenses that we have two major expenses that we have to deal with out at the airport. First is personnel, as with most businesses. And then second is our maintenance and operation, mainly being hangar repairs, occasional striping of the airfield and crack seal, as well as operations, which is our cost of goods sold for both avgas and jet fuel. I'd be more than happy to take any questions at this time.
You have avgas going down a little bit and jet fuel going up a little bit.
Yes, that's correct.
Why is that?
It's hard to say for sure. I think that's major just a trend of GA aircraft, general aviation aircraft, maybe flying less.
So it's an industry trend, not anything specific to Woodring?
I would not say so.
Okay.
Maybe some increase in military for the jet fuel, but that would be it.
Okay, thank you.
Is that it?
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Now we're going to move on to the Special Projects Fund. It can be found on page 84. This is a fund that's utilized by our police department. The police department has three major things that come into this fund. There are restitution funds, federal and state seizure funds. And so what happens is whatever they collect in here, they can use in future years for those specified purposes. In the current budget coming up, they have in there a shooting simulator that will be a half reimbursed by our Oklahoma Municipal Assurance Group through a grant program as a reimbursement. So that is why there is an increase in that funding for next year. They do have a fund balance of $312,000 is where it's projected to be at the end of the year. Questions on the Special Projects Fund? Okay. Next is 911. 911 fund continues to be a fund that we have some funding issues with. You'll see this next year in revenue, we have quite an increase. There is actually a $425,000 operating transfer to their fund to support so that they are stay in the black at the end of next year. The current year we're in, it was only a $200,000 transfer. So as we look to come up with solutions for this in the future, that will continue to be a concern. I know that we've looked at maybe bringing on additional counties or going back, and I know not too long ago passed a 911 fee for wireless, and I know that there's been some talk to go back and talk to the state legislature about that some more to see if we can adjust and consolidate maybe down some of these 911 centers. I think it's a problem all across the state, not unique to Enid. Personnel services, again, those health trends that we're seeing all across the city are what's driving that cost up there. Contractual and M&O, actually a slight decrease. Maintenance and operations, a slight increase for a remodel that needs to be done at the 911 center to expand there. Capital outlay, you see there's a increase of $126,000. They have a Zetron machine, which is a piece of equipment that they use to, I think, kind of calibrate all the radio frequencies in the county so that they can communicate with each other. It's time for them to do an upgrade on that. So this will be a one-time expense that we won't have again next year. So that's part of why the funding increased $225,000 for the fund this year. Any questions on 911? We have Captain Ryan Singleton here, who's over 911. If there's any specific questions, he can answer for you. All right. We'll move on to the police fund. Again, police fund, we talked about this when we were talking about transfers from general fund. You can see the revenue increase that's here. There's a slight increase, the 2% in public safety tax. So that sales tax flow through there. And then also there's just an increased transfer from the general fund of $723,000 more. Now of that $723,000 more, $200,000 of that went straight through here to the 911 system. So about $500,000 was needed more to fund the operations of the police department. Again, trend here, health for the personnel services. Contractual services and maintenance and operations are up, maintenance and operations is up 1.5%. Contractual services is mainly up due to some work comp claims. Capital outlay for this next year, they have budgeted 10 workstations and 12 tablets to go and 12 new vehicles for next year. They originally were planned for the current year to be at $195,000 deficit, but they are tracking right now to come in at an $89,000 surplus on the year. So their fund balance is projected to be at $2.3 million at the end of this year.
Brian, we have under professional services, the jail contract at $110,000. Do we feel like we're getting a good deal for that? I mean, I know it's the only game in the county, but the endless number of complaints and concerns that are coming out of that facility these days, you know, there are other counties in Oklahoma, and I hate to throw stuff around like that, but I'm moderately concerned that we are sending people to a place that's not particularly safe. You talk to me a little bit about how receptive the county's been to our feedback and our concern. I mean, that's a pretty big chunk of their budget, I expect.
They've been pretty receptive to our feedback and have taken some actions. I know I worked with Carol a lot on some issues over there. As you know, and everybody knows, the sheriff's department is sort of in flux at the moment.
Has been for a year and a half.
Yeah, and it is the only game in town. I do feel like they're getting our prisoners in and out a little bit better now.
Okay.
There are some steps that Carol talked about to reduce our incarcerations. Now, you know, going to another county, that could be dicey. I mean, that's a long trip, I get it.
Sure.
But you know, we have those options, and we have the contract, of course, which gives us some leverage on getting that done. But all in all, yeah, there's some bumps in the road, but all in all, I think it's hopefully this will work out.
Okay. Hope so too.
Seems like it.
Any other questions on the police fund that we can address for you? Move on to other public safety fire fund. Again, you see the same trends in revenue with public safety tax being up a little bit, and then the transfer again is increased. The transfer increase from general fund is just over $500,000 this year. Personnel services, again, health. And then we have contractual services and maintenance and operations. Contractual services almost exactly even. There were a few more dollars budgeted for some travel and training that they had requested. And there's also in maintenance and operations a higher transfer to 911 for that Zetron, the portion that the fire department uses there. Capital outlay, you could see we budgeted about the same as the current year. Police department has been doing their due diligence on their pumper truck this year and has not had time to get that out and awarded, so we're rebudgeting it next year. I think we're pretty close to letting that out for bid and get that going, so it'll be shortly after the first of the year, and that's why there's a decrease in what we've actually spent this year. It's going to be a carryover item. Again, they were budgeted at a deficit of $845,000, but without buying the pumper truck and just with other savings, they're projected to come in at a surplus of a little over $60,000, and that will put their fund balance to be at $1.1 million at the end of this budget going into next year's budget. So they're in good shape as well. Any questions on fire department? Chief Joe Jackson's here to answer any questions you may have on the fire department. All right. CDBG is our next one. It's on page 139. In your budget book, it is all just as one number in there, and we budget not only the current year allocations that were in federal fiscal year 18, but also the funds for federal fiscal year 19. The funding committee has presented to me, this is the recommendation and the breakdown. They're receiving $424,000 this next year. And I believe we have a hearing tonight to discuss those funding recommendations from the funding committee. questions on that? Okay. Then our last fund that we have to pick up with tonight is the Enid Public Transportation Authority. And this is showing, this one starts on page 184. Current year budget is balanced. Next year's budget that we have present is again balanced. We're coming in a little short on revenue and a little higher on expenditures. That has to do with the mid-year budget appropriation where we were able to obtain 2 buses with 5339 funds that were not originally presented in last year's budget. As we look at just the revenue for the Transit Authority, overall our ride revenue is coming in a little shorter than we anticipated this year. A little bit lower on some advertising, I think, is probably what's driving that. And I know that position has been vacant, so that's caused a little bit of lag there. And I know we'll get that picked back up. Grant revenue increase, that has to do with the buses this year. We are also anticipating some bus revenue for next year. That's why there is an increase over current year. And funding from the city to supplement is steady from where it is current year. So no increase or decrease in funding to the transit to allow them to purchase those 2 buses. Personnel services, status quo, they had some turnover that caused them to come in lower, but the health claims with their turnover and lower salaries about left that even for the year, is a $6,000 difference. Contractual services, the main thing again driving that is work comp expenses in this year, and we've adjusted a little bit next year as we overlap that. Maintenance and operations, really the only increase there is just some vehicle maintenance. We are still getting some older buses, but we're able to replace some of the really older buses, but we just seen a trend where we needed to adjust that vehicle maintenance there. And then capital outlay, you can see we budgeted a lot lower. We did an adjustment to buy those 2 buses, and we're anticipating 2 other buses in this year through the 5339 grant process. We're anticipating $112,000 in revenue and having to spend only $28,000 out of EPTA to be able to get those buses for $140,000. If you have questions on this budget, Mary Beth, the EPTA General Manager, is here to answer any questions there.
A year ago, when we did this, I asked if we had looked at transitioning over time to CNG vehicles. That at that time, I think there weren't really any available on the ODOT contract or the purchasing contract. And we also are, although we have some facility out at the service center for CNG, it's maybe limited. Have we looked at that any further in the last year? Has that changed at all?
Yeah, we have. We've actually met with CNG. There was several of us that met, myself and Everett, did you join us at that time, or Keith did? I think Keith did. And so we have been looking at that and to see what the possibilities are and review that. We also have some information coming in from the Oklahoma Transit Association that has also provided us here within the last couple of months with some information. So definitely still looking into it.
Still on our radar anyway?
Yes,
Okay.
sir.
One of the issues as we looked at it with CNG is with relatively low gas prices, it doesn't make a lot of financial sense, but if gas prices go up significantly,
Sure.
it starts making.
Do we know what our break even is? At what point the cost transition starts to make sense?
No, I don't know that right now, but it's something we could certainly look at. Because again, when we buy gas, we're buying it wholesale.
Sure.
Free of the taxes as well. So we enjoyed a period of relatively low petroleum prices. So we also visited, I think, in another meeting, there was a company that was interested in coming in here and doing some, putting in a CNG station. And just, we talked to them a little bit. It just seemed like cost-wise, it just wasn't, cost-benefit-wise, it wasn't making a lot of sense right then. But we're still looking at it, and we'll continue to. And for that matter, we can look at it for the whole fleet if it starts to make sense.
I'm kind of curious at what point that,
we
when the price of gas gets up above a certain point, like what's our threshold that we need to start looking at it more seriously?
Okay. Well, I'll make a note here to
Yeah.
Thank you.
look into that.
Are there any federal or state inducements in trying to convert? I know.
I don't know the answer to that right
Okay,
now.
that's something else we'd probably want to look at, because that might make it.
Well, one of the issues of, we did look at, in fact, I want to say one of the meetings that I was in, we were talking about vehicles, and it seemed to be more cost effective too if we were going to go to vehicles to get new vehicles that are already equipped from the factory
Okay.
for CNG. And it seemed like it was a more than $1,000, maybe a multi-$1,000 cost. And on some of our vehicles that might make sense, but we also do run a lot of vehicles that are, we have some older vehicles in the fleet, and it clearly wouldn't make sense to try and retrofit those.
Okay.
We can certainly look into that as we continue to look at the break-even cost and maybe other opportunities that are out there.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks.
All right. It's our hope tonight during the regular session that you guys would make any motions or changes known to us as we move through each of those sections so that we can capture all of that this evening and send out a revised electronic draft for you tomorrow so that you have time to review that before Thursday's meeting at 5 to hopefully approve this budget so we can begin working on getting everything taken care of with it for the end of the year. So. All right.
Joe, I have a question about healthcare. It seems every time we looked at one of these, the healthcare seems to be bumping it up. I know everybody's paying more every year for healthcare. Does the city have any type of a program to incentivize folks to be healthier?
That's a good question. We have some wellness benefits. We offer some wellness benefits depending on your health care coverage that allows an employee to join a health club, for instance. We have a health fair once a year, and we're doing preventive screenings at that health fair to try and identify problems. It's probably an area we could look further into. We have smoking cessation programs. And Sonia, that's what comes to mind. Am I missing something? Do we have any other wellness program benefits that the commissioner is referring to?
During our annual
For
health fair,
instance?
we always do some kind of promotion to get employees involved more. Try to reach out and have them, participate in a 5K or have a walking challenge. So we try to keep employees motivated that way. But I think the most popular is definitely the participation in the annual screening and getting wellness dollars to these for gym memberships. It's really
Well, if we could make it a little higher priority and a little more visible, and I've seen this in other companies where it becomes a bigger deal. Maybe it is here and I just haven't seen it, but economically it looks like a little change could translate to a lot of dollars. So
Well, we're certainly open to looking at anything because every year it's a challenge with increasing costs. And this year's been probably a larger challenge than normal as well. So certainly we're open to looking at that. We're already ready to start looking at next year. It's too early for us to get any kind of estimate of what our claims are going to be in the next year, but to focus on what options can we offer our employees to still offer good coverage and still control costs better. And if that's with more fitness incentives or somehow encouragement or something, we're open to that. Certainly it's a national problem too, so if anybody at the state or national level can help us solve it too, we're open to their ideas as well. That's a good question.
I wasn't paying that, I wasn't looking specifically at that, but I would think the police and fire department, because they are generally more fit and have to be generally more fit for their jobs, I would think their health costs are lower than the average other employee, but I don't know that that's true.
I don't know that we look at it that way. We certainly do monitor, we have high-cost claimants, and that drives a lot. There's typically 7 to 9, something like that roughly, which could be any one of us at any time, from me to a policeman or fireman.
Okay.
I know police and fire, the chiefs can speak, they have some programs.
So we have programs in place along with incentives for fitness. We have mandatory physical agility for all officers. And if passed every year, they get incentives, whether it be extra pay or extra day. days off. Depends on your level of pass that. So there is a competition there. So there is a carrot to stay fit. Along with, of course, we have a fitness center that's used 24/7 along with spouses. So we do have a program in place for fitness. And it seems to work. I mean, when we first started that, we had maybe 15 guys, 14 guys get incentives, and we made it mandatory. We jumped to about 40 different officers got incentives because they actually tried to get those. So, and we brought in healthcare people, dietitians, things like that for classes. So we have incentives.
Mayor, I address it in a rather different way. I don't offer incentives. I have a mandatory annual physical that they must comply with. So that's an incentive for them to be more fit to pass the physical. Also, it was the early findings of problems will save the city money in the long run. Everybody on the department, including me, take an annual physical that you have to pass your respiratory part where I have to be fit enough to wear an air pack, but it's for their safety and also for their health in the long term.
Thank you. I'd like to, and tell me if this is the right agenda item to talk about it. There are a couple of capital improvement things I'd like to that maybe got abandoned in the last fiscal year that I'd like to talk about. Is this the appropriate time?
Sure.
Two things. We did design work for a trail link to Vance Air Force Base.
Yes,
We did some design work, right?
we have a design.
We have a
plan.
design.
We have a
We have
plan for the.
$0 for implementing that plan in that budget, correct?
That's correct.
What's our ballpark cost for doing that? Was that roughly $1 million or some crazy number like that?
That's a long stretch. I think it was pretty high. I don't know if we have a cost estimate available for that, but, well, we do have a cost estimate. I just don't know exactly what it is. I don't know if.
Yeah, the last
Chris,
time we
remember?
looked at that, it was approximately 1.5.
Okay.
4 or 5. Okay.
That's obviously a couple of years old, but we're pretty conservative.
Okay. We were going to, at some point, continue talks with the Air Force Base about getting our trails connected. Has there been any progress in the intervening time? I mean, have we, clearly this will be used primarily by folks on the base. There are a lot of people on the base already using it. Clearly there's an interest to get something done, but it seems like we kind of abandoned it this last fiscal year.
Well, if you want to, yes, we've abandoned it, I guess, from the fact that it wasn't a budgeted item.
Sure.
The fact that we have a design and there's a desire of advanced personnel, maybe other personnel hasn't changed. If we can figure out how to fund that.
Is this a project that we can do in any kind of incremental step? I mean, these big projects are sometimes hard to bite off and swallow.
Probably could. I don't know that it's designed.
In a year
that
at
way.
once. I think it was designed as one big, but 1.5 is, I mean, we've done that for trails before, I think, but that's
Like
an
a
awful
phase it?
big, yeah. But is there a way to phase that over time?
Probably could be.
There are ways to phase that over time. We'd have to go back and take a look at it on how it was laid out
Mhm.
to make it useful. Yeah, we can do that.
That might be worth at least looking at
Okay.
how we could phase that. I mean, it feels like that is the next logical chunk, big chunk that we should do. I think it would get used a lot. I think it would be one of the prettier chunks. It's kind of a nice area down there. And then likewise, the low water crossing at Meadow Lake Park, where are we?
It's in design.
Before you go there, Ben,
Yeah.
could I talk a little bit about that? Well, maybe we ought to consider public-private partnerships. Probably there are civic clubs that'd be interested in taking on a section of that to Vance Air Force Base. Because everybody supports Vance Air Force Base, and if you come up and say, well, we just don't quite have the money to hook up the trail system all the way down there, the Rotary Club or the Lions Club or somebody, they might say, well, yeah, we could. I'm involved in another place where I spend some time that's done exactly that to make a trail system work. So
It's a good idea.
It's a tangible thing that people can do that
Yeah.
clearly,
can put a
like we
sign
have
out
the,
there.
the Ambux has or they donate to the city, but the billboards and stuff like that,
Sure.
they're kind of fluffier. This is an actual tangible thing that people get their hands on.
Yeah, and if we could break the project into, say, 3 phases,
Mhm.
and then a $1.5 million project becomes a $500,000. And public-private, if there's a way to maybe fund half of that, that certainly makes it a lot easier for the city to be able to fund $250,000 or $300,000 or $400,000. Well, much like the soccer complex approach, except
Yeah.
that's a little bigger
Bit-
project.
Bit bigger.
Yeah.
So, but as part of that, we need to get from one side of Middle Lake to the other. We have been
Yes.
now 2 years, 2 budget cycles that we're supposed to have the thing designed. It's still not quite
The
designed
design
yet.
should be complete within a month or so, I believe.
End of May, early June.
Like 24 months designing this thing.
Well, we didn't even spend 24 months designing it. We spent about 8 months designing it.
Sure.
But the cost on that, when it's done, the cost estimate is $150,000 to $300,000.
But that's also not in this budget, correct?
It is not in the budget.
Okay.
But that is a smaller piece, that if we find a way to fund it, or we have excess funds, or.
That's when I'd like to see some way to push it. We've been talking about it now for 3 budget cycles. If we're that close to finally getting the blasted thing engineered, let's find some way to actually do it. It is a first step to getting the trail system connected to the Air Force Base. We have to have a way for people to safely get from one side of Middle Lake to the other if we want to connect it to the trail system.
Yeah, in effect, it is a phase.
Yeah, and so it is kind of a phase, and if that really is that scale, let's maybe try to get that pieced in.
Do you think we should focus on that first as the first phase, because it's already
Boy, that seems like a
bite-sized
really
chunk?
good idea, yeah. I'd like, and so if we could find room in the budget for that. The last trail question I have, we did this was in a slide in May of last year, design activity, France to downtown, determining route feasibility, developing initial plan to support a budget submittal. We don't have any budget submittal for doing that. I mean, the connection from France to downtown isn't, at least in my mind, what we talked about last budget year, I think even, and then right after budget year when we did this, had that study session item, was that it's not going to be some big expensive pouring concrete. We have a lot of sidewalk, we have State Street's really nice, we have all the work done on the high school campus, that we have a couple gaps, that if we could identify a couple gaps of sidewalk and some signage, we have a totally viable pedestrian connection from where the trail ends at the football stadium to where all the stuff's happening downtown, using the already existing pedestrian access here at City Hall. I mean, those cost $150,000, $200,000 to put one in. If we can use what we have, there's just those gaps. So that I didn't see in this budget year either.
It is not in the budget year.
Uh-huh.
I do agree with you. Last time we talked about it at a study session some time ago now, we talked about a couple alternatives. And what I recall is there was a difference of opinion amongst the commissioners
Shocking.
about the route. And so that's really the challenge we had at the time, because I know that I agree with using the route that gets us there, that uses existing sidewalks we have.
Mm-hmm.
But there were some commissioners at the time that felt that we should go down Grand and maybe even develop a park at the old depot. And we can certainly do that too, but the problem is money and buying houses.
Sure.
So I think that's what bogged us down. I'm pretty
Okay.
sure that's what I recall, so I don't.
Well, it feels like an in-house design thing we can do, and I know there has to be a budget item in order for us to make you actually do it. And I'd like to see a small budget item for in-house design of identifying the gaps and the signage cost in order to make that connection, utilizing as much existing sidewalk, trail, pedestrian access as we already have. I mean, I want to know what it would take to actually make that a coherent connection
I
point.
think what I hear you saying is that we need to do a little bit of work and come back to you at a future study session soon
Mm-hmm.
and talk about that. And yes, I think we could probably do that. One of the things that is in the budget this year that was in the engineering department budget is we added a design engineer position. Now, I don't think we have a vacancy right now. So, but design engineers don't grow on trees,
Mhm.
and they're difficult to recruit. So I'm a little bit hamstrung right now with, that's the right word. I'm not trying to make excuses. We're going to go get some design engineers hired to come in, but I see a future study session on the downtown approach again. We'll probably look at it from the perspective of using exactly what you said, State Street and the sidewalks over by the Integris thing
And all the work the high school's done to make
figure
high
out what
you know,
holes are left,
Yeah,
and then you guys can.
that's what
weigh
I'd
in
like to
on-
see. And if you'll do it without having to put a budget item, that's great. But you know, this is our one chance a year to make these projects actually happen. So
It's
let's
the one big chance.
one
but
big
as you
chance.
know,
This
you
is
always get
the
an
best
opportunity to
chance.
modify
Sure,
the
sure. We can
budget.
always come back and modify the budget, but budget season is when it's the appropriate time to bring it up.
Right. I've noted a study session in the near future.
Okay. And in the meantime, if we can find the money to do the Meadow Lake as the first link, and then maybe figure out the phasing for the rest, I don't want to lose momentum with our trail system. It gets used a lot. It's been a good system. That's all I got.
Clear.
Thank you.
All right. Okay, I think that's probably it for here. we'll adjourn and meet upstairs at 6:30.
Thank you for watching the Enid City Commission study session. All meetings are broadcast on local cable channel 12 and in high definition on channel 112. In addition, the study session is live streamed on the web at enidtv.org. If you have any questions or comments regarding this broadcast, please visit the City of Enid website at enid.org.